Hi everyone, I want to talk about the GoD and what the changes that we have seen from the PTR to the live server mean for the future of it. This is not a full guide, I'm not gonna make an updated guide for it anyway, but I just finished updating the Maxwell Season 23 guide for it, and I figured I could also talk about it a little bit. That one will be pushed to live very soon, but here I want to explain things for the veterans that already know the build. And a lot of people were really upset that GoD was nerfed and it's so bad now and you can only use it in G16 and all these kinds of things. Well, I want to give you some more optimistic thoughts about those changes. In case you're not exactly aware of what they are, we have a heavy nerf to the quiver, which it can now only pierce 4 times. And we got a buff to the 6-piece bonus, which they implemented after a lot of feedback. And it went from 10,000% to 15,000%. So 50% more damage here, and we have a reduction on the pierces. So the setups will change a little bit because of this. First of all, your AoE damage is greatly reduced. So this means that yes, the top end pushing potential is definitely lower. You can't push as high anymore with the GoD. But on the other hand, you have much more raw DPS. And you have much more single target DPS compared to your AoE damage now. Previously, you had some big pulls where you were piercing 20 times, 30 times, 40 times easily, and with the devouring arrow effect, stacking up the damage for every single pierce, that was obviously extremely strong. It was a single target ability that had the craziest AoE scaling in the game pretty much, aside from maybe Spirit Barrage. So what happened now is that it's actually a single target build, or a much more single target focused build. So much so actually that you're not gonna run Stricken anymore. There is no bonus Stricken in this. So you kill the boss in a good time on pushing tiers no matter what. I guess on the very high end pushing, let's say like 140 or so, you might need maybe the 3 minutes or so for the boss. But for anything below that, for speed farming, you're just gonna annihilate the boss. You're gonna annihilate elites. Previously you had this issue that you were pushing really high tiers and you did no damage whatsoever after the density was thinning out, and you just couldn't kill anything off. So you had those 10% HP elites, and like past, let's say GR 130 or something, you would spend minutes trying to kill them because you simply didn't have any damage. On the very high end for solo pushing, like 140, 145, 150, you would spend 5, 6, 7 minutes, 8 minutes on the boss alone. And obviously this was extremely ridiculous, and that is with Bane of the Stricken. The other change that contributed to this is actually the followers. So previously you're running Flavor of Time, and now you have Flavor of Time on your follower, so you're essentially forced to wear a Squirt's necklace on many ranged builds especially. And that includes GoD and Hunter. Even without any protection for it, you're gonna run Squirt's Necklace, because first of all, it's 100% extra damage on the boss essentially, because on a boss you're most likely never going to get hit if you use your smoke screen well and they dodge a little bit. And even in Rift you can get shield pylons. You sometimes just run around making pulls, you have a little bit of extra damage because you're not getting hit for a while. So that does happen. And on top of that, this pierce change doesn't actually do anything on single target. So you were only getting like 2 or 3 pierces maximum anyway when you were fighting the Rift Guardian. So obviously when you go so many tiers lower, suddenly your single target damage is greatly improved. The thing is that a few tiers come alone from missile dampening fishing, which only the super hardcore guys do on the very high end. So mostly the 150 pushers, they will go for like missile dampening and stuff. Obviously, it was nice to find missile dampening because they would just explode, or you could even kill multiple elites of those with basically no time investment. So that is completely gone now. They don't do anything anymore for you. So sad story, but on the other hand, oh man, what a relief. You don't have to go for missile dampening anymore. That's actually amazing. So the top end potential is gonna be somewhere at around 140 for Demon Hunter, which makes it around even with Natalia Rapid Fire, which is the next best build, or that might even perhaps pull ahead if some Paragon 8k dudes actually try it. The thing with Natalia Rapid Fire is you can't really play it, at least not very successfully, until like Paragon 5k or so, because it simply has no toughness and you're gonna get destroyed. And while it's possible to stack up more toughness on that build, it just costs you too much and the build does not really perform well anymore. And that means that GoD is actually going to stay the top tier build on Demon Hunter for pushing and for pretty much everything in the game. And on top of that, it's actually the #1 XP farmer by quite a margin. So I can show you our solo XP tier list here from season 22, and look at what we have here. We have the best builds for solo XP. We have Bone Spear, Tempest Rush, and Hanging Arrow. And guess what? Bone Spear loses a fuck ton here from the 4th cube dropping out. Tempest Rush is already slightly behind God anyway, and probably loses more. And then you have, well, this. And the new stuff is not good enough. So Rafma is quite weak, and Firebirds is okay. It will probably be landing somewhere here in the B tier right now. In case of a buff, which might happen after the last developments, it might end up somewhere close to God DH, but DH is actually the #1 solo build in the game. Look at that. So here I try to like estimate the potential tiers you can run with the top builds of each class for solo GR farming, like 2 to 3 minutes at a kind of reasonable paragon here. And well, it's just very good. And this is what it is. It's actually an improvement for farming because the set actually has more raw power when you fight few targets, which is generally the case when you do speed farming, because you don't make these large pulls that you do in fishing, where you go for, you know, this crazy festering woods with like 6 elite packs at once. So obviously this works pretty well here. Now for the actual setups that you want to run with your weapons, there are also a few changes now, mostly because of the Forced Squirt's Necklace and the dropping the Bane of the Stricken, which is simply not really required anymore. So I would recommend the standard low-end setup with Valor's Bequest yet again for next season, but you want to transition to Fortress Ballista as soon as possible. So this was an option that was already there all the time, but it was not really played all that much because it was kind of hard to, you know, keep squirts up in any case, or at least make squirts worth more than the Flavor of Time. But Flavor of Time is not an option anymore. You need to have squirts, and this means that with the Ballista you can protect the squirts quite often during the run. Not all the time, obviously. When you have many dangerous elites or there's lots of ghosts and archers and whatnot, it's gonna be a struggle, especially on low end of paragons. But once you upgrade your character, once you upgrade the paragons and you become a bit more tanky, there is actually a reasonable way to keep up the Squirt's Necklace in most fights if you're careful. So to give you some numbers, Valor's Bequest gives you between around 0 to 25% extra DPS and healing because of the mechanics of how it spawns extra hanging arrows for you in high density, and it doesn't do anything on, for example, the Rift Guardian or when you have almost no density whatsoever. This is because the strafe projectiles that pierce can proc the 4-piece bonus that spawns the hanging arrows immediately when the cooldown is up, which is 9 frames, and this is the whole reason why Valor's Request setup actually exists. So you only have to beat this kind of 25% bonus or around that to be better than Valor's, and this is not all that hard because you just need to keep up your squirts, you know, half the time maybe, and that is probably quite doable in most cases. I tried this on quite low end on the PTR, and as I said, as long as you're not fighting like many elite packs at once with all the dangerous affixes, it is actually doable. So you try to stay out of the pool a little bit more, you try to use a smoke screen at the right timing, try to not get hit, you know, with multiple combos in a row, and that actually works. And on the boss, you're gonna have this permanently. I'm very convinced that this is gonna be the setup that most people on the high-end pushing will run in the end, and it's quite playable. Let's say from Paragon 1500 to 2k or so with some augments, maybe with a bit of vitality and paragons, you can definitely do that. Obviously your mileage may vary because of how well you're able to survive and how much you're willing to fish for kind of the easy monster types, the easy elites. So obviously this is not always possible. There will be rifts where this just sucks, and there will be other rifts where you have like perma squirts and you're blasting. So this is kind of the thing to watch out for. But on the other hand, the fishing potential is greatly reduced. So there comes this now, and overall still a big improvement. So lastly, about Odyssey's End. So this is the setup that theoretically has the most damage, and it has always been there. It has always been on the guide. I always talked about this, and we have never seen this actually in action. So Northar has been pushing this a little bit, and from his experiences it seems a bit worse on the live servers, and I can also understand why. Even though the theoretical damage is much higher, you do lose out on hanging arrows because you need to stack up entangling shot first. You have to keep it up during your CTPS cycles, and it's just, you know, very difficult to do this properly as well for most people. So obviously this was not really going to show up on the leaderboards, especially not in season 21, where you didn't want to slow everything all the time because you had to kite them into the environmental effects. But also in season 22, it seemed like people were just better off not going for this because they were fishing for these super crazy density rifts. But now when you think about actually fighting much smaller pulls, you don't need to entangle so much anymore. You just need to do the rotation every 4 seconds. You swap between the two generators. So you do entangle, hanging arrow, straight for 3.5 seconds, entangle, hanging arrow, and then repeat. And like this, you don't really need these large pulls anymore because your hanging arrow doesn't pierce like 30 targets. So you can just go for smaller pulls, you entangle a little bit, that's it. Not only that, but because we also don't have Stricken, we are forced to use Bane of the Trapped now. And Bane of the Trapped doesn't really have the greatest value. Certainly not in the Fortress Splitter Star setup, because yeah, you just don't really have much to proc it. You have your follower a little bit, you have the aura a little bit, but you can't really use the aura all that much because you will just get hit too much and lose your squirts. On the Vala setups, this is kind of doable. You can basically run in the middle and not really care too much about the squirts and use the aura. But yeah, mostly it will come from your follower that will apply the slows for you. But here you actually have to slow yourself because of entangling shot. And on top of all of that, you also have advantage on the boss. You're gonna kill the boss much faster than the other setups because the raw damage is higher and you don't really lose anything from entangling it once in a while. Every tier that you go higher, the boss fight will take straight up 17% longer because this is the HP scaling per tier, and you don't have Bane of Stricken, and you don't have this mechanic that squishes the kill times between the setups closer together. So while we haven't seen Odyssey's End pretty much at all in the past, I believe now it has finally come the time for Odyssey's End to shine. So I am very excited. I will most likely go for this when I do my DH pushes. I want to do this. I want to try it out. I want to get a rank 1 of this. And well, here we go. Finally, I think the time has come. So if you're looking for that challenge, go for the Odyssey's End. I think this is going to be great. And well, as I said, it's still hard to predict if this is actually going to be better, but there are 3 very good arguments in favor of Odyssey's End now. So yeah, also all the other setups that I've updated already, so you can find them in my D3 planners here. And also you're going to see them on the Maxwell guides. For form and speeds, Demon Hunter is actually also not looking so bad. So it has kind of the same mechanic with, you know, like the raw damage that kind of outweighs the nerf to the quiver. Very slightly though, because in groups you do group up enemies a bit more than in solo. And on top of that, the rats lose a lot more than the GoD. So GoD form and meta with double God, ZDH, Z-Barb versus the rats meta or the bats meta or probably the Firebirds meta is actually also looking pretty solid. I don't really expect it to be kind of like the overarching meta for everyone because most people will probably play the Firebirds or will play rats. But if you have a team, if you want to assemble a team with the Aegis, it is definitely quite up there. And it's going to be not far behind. I'd say maybe 15, 20, maybe 25% in terms of XP per hour. So quite close at least. So this is what I wanted to share here. If you're going to play the Age, you're going to have a good time, even despite the nerf that actually will turn out to be a buff for most people playing the build, I believe. So there's always going to be some people really upset about, yeah, you can't push that high, but we definitely have some other really huge perks here. So this is what I wanted to highlight. Hope you liked my video, and I'll see you guys next time.